Happy Thursday. Welcome to Thursday Thoughts with your host, that Ed Law lady. I am in Koyo and here for just another Thursday Thought. Today's topic is actually an interesting one. You may have been seeing all these things going out about pandemic pods. So today I'm talking about the problem with pods and what we should do instead. So, again, that's our topic for today. We're going to talk about the pandemic pods, the equity issues that are inherently embedded in this, and then the fact that it's just not really a global solution to the issues we face right now in education. So, if you're new to me, like I said, I am in Koyo, principal attorney at the S. Young firm. We are an education law firm that advocates unapologetically for excellence, equity, and educational justice alongside communities of color. We show up in two ways. We mobilize mothers in particular to be strong advocates for their children, helping them to build their capacity to advocate on behalf of their children, particularly in areas of special education and school discipline. We also consult with equity focused schools, organizations in the education space who really want to make sure that we are delivering excellence to every single child. And we help them to build out strong communication, parent engagement plans, and really be thoughtful about how they engage and build culture and community within their ecosystem. So that's just a little bit about what we do at the F Young firm. As that Ed Law lady, I just like to keep it 100. This is like my one space to just solely be myself and not worry about all the implications of everything. So I was actually on a call with another lady, and she was saying that she takes her safe space with her. So I am bringing my safe space with me today here to have what is a difficult conversation, because first and foremost, before I am anything, I am a mother. I have two children, one who has special needs, who receives services for that under the IDEA. He has an IEP. And then a really small little guy who is just starting his journey into life at 17 months, figuring out and exploring things. So as a parent, I will tell you, and I will tell every client of mine, any parent that I talk to will tell you that I say, unequivocally, unapologetically, you have to do what is absolutely best for your child. Whatever is within your capacity to do, you need to do that. I am a big proponent of trusting your gut, identifying that parents are often experts on their children. They know them, they understand them. They may not see everything that they do. And, I think this whole remote learning experience has allowed us to meet other parts of our children that we may not have been familiar with before. But at the end of the day, you know your child, you have a voice, and what you say matters. And I think ultimately we are each as parents responsible for shepherding our children through life in the best way possible. So I understand the desire, the energy that parents are espousing to create these pods to be able to make sure that their children are being educated as effectively as possible in the wake of a global pandemic where kids are at home, parents are probably sometimes working from home also, or potentially have to work outside the home. Schools are closed, and so it's like, who's going to make sure that my child is learning and learning at the level that I think is appropriate? So I just want to call out and say, like, I completely understand that. I think in some ways, the pandemic pods is a very innovative approach to thinking about community, and using your resources to make sure that, pooling resources to make sure that your child and other children have the opportunity to learn. And so I want to say that, from that perspective, I think it's a brilliant way for parents in the community to take back a bit of ownership and control over how our children are educated and by whom. And I think, for some teachers who going back into the school setting is not really an option for them, it may be a great opportunity to create businesses, enterprise, etc. So I think, from one standpoint, there are some positives to it. But I think why I'm here, what I'm saying, here's the problem with the pandemic pods, is that it just continues to exacerbate the issues underlying our public education system. In a perfect world, our public education system would be able to pivot in this environment and figure out how to deliver excellent education to every child in whatever setting is possible. And I want to extend grace because, again, this is not something that educators have had to do in the past. And so they're learning while doing. You know, I had a whole, I feel like most of my career I've spent uh, building the plane while I'm flying it. So I have a lot of grace, a lot of empathy for our school teams that are trying to figure this out while having to execute it and recognizing that it won't be perfect. But I also think that we have such an amazing opportunity now to really look at and dissect and analyze what we're doing in public education and whether it's actually meeting the needs of most people in the system. And so right now, we have teachers saying like, this is infringing on my rights. You're requiring me to come in here. You have schools and parents saying, no, you have these contracts that say whatever they say. I don't know if you all are following the news. The Florida Teachers Association sued the state over the reopening plans. The NAACP has actually filed a lawsuit against the Secretary of Education about what they're doing with funds, and particularly Title I funds. And so this is an opportunity where a lot of people are saying things are not working the way that we anticipated or hoped or expected them to. And so rather than solely focus on creating a pod that allows you to kind of exercise your privilege, that's what I'm going to say. And I share that privilege too. So this isn't about making people feel bad, but it's identifying that, one, your ability to have a network of other parents or families that you feel comfortable educating your children around that can pool resource together and pay thousands of dollars in some instances for tutors, and being able to hire some of the best educators to come into your home or whatever space that you have is a privilege. Having the ability to manage the transportation and all the different logistics that come into that are privileges that you have. And so identify that, acknowledge that, and let's figure out how collectively we can lend our privilege to those who do not have the networks, do not have the resources, etc. And I think one of the big reasons why our education system is the way that it is right now is because we have been pulling out not only funds, taking away resources, requiring schools to cut budgets, etc., but we have also been draining it of the human capital that makes any community great, right? So if you don't have parents who have access to different resources, networks, etc., who can come and put their hands around a school, around a classroom, and ensure that that community thrives, it's very difficult for that community to do so, even with what the government is doing. And we can all, acknowledge that what the government is doing right now is insufficient. I have a lot of friends who are educators who are putting up donors choose accounts to try to get the technology that they would need to be able to deliver a sound educational experience virtually. They are buying their own cameras and lighting and microphones, and purchasing their own subscriptions to different platforms that allow them to maneuver, manipulate, do things. We have forever been talking to the community about how much teachers spend out of their own pocket to make sure that there are the materials that your students need to learn. I am a former teacher. I spent a lot of my own money from the very little salary that I was getting from the district to make sure that my kids had chapter books, that they had cleaning supplies, that there were crayons, and we could have this visually appealing, word rich environment, right? So teachers are paying for that. That shouldn't happen, right? They're being asked to go into a setting where there's a highly communicable disease and not being offered hazard pay. Some teachers haven't even received raises in I don't know how long. And so again, you end up having people say, while I love what I'm doing, this is not sustainable for me as a human being to be able to stay in here. And so what we do see is you have a lot of teachers leave the profession. I saw a lot of really excellent teachers leave the classroom to either go to, into administration or, the district office or consulting, etc., because it wasn't financially feasible to remain in a teaching career, right? You could have 10, 20 years of experience and not really be getting paid. Like, these are sacrifices we're asking people to make to deliver what should be exceptional service and learning for our future, but we're not willing to invest in the people who are delivering it, right? That is a problem. And so what this pandemic pod opportunity presents is, again, excellent teachers have the opportunity then to go and actually get paid six figures working for a community of a smaller, better potentially job environment, etc. And so they're going to leave. That's a reasonable, rational decision to make, is to leave and go somewhere where you're getting poured into, right? And what does that do to the public education system, right? It prevents us from being able to deliver that same level of excellence there. We're all identifying that this plan for virtual learning is like, one, if you even have a plan, like, I don't really actually know how my kids' school's planning on delivering this, if it's going to look like what it did in the spring, if they have invested in any type of technology, training, etc., which, being as a lot of districts have waited to the last minute to decide what they're going to do, some teachers are being asked to then take on professional learning around how to deliver in a virtual setting in their off time, when they're not being paid, they're not being compensated for this, right? They're choosing to do this because of the love that they have for their work and their dedication to their craft. So again, we have to look at a system that allows these types of issues to arise. I'm not going to give any type of legal advice here. I've dibble dabbled in some labor and employment, but I'm not a labor and employment attorney. But it kind of raises some questions about, like, if you're required to do stuff, but you're not being paid for it, but you have to do it. Like, maybe there are some questions there around whether our system is actually really honoring the people who just a couple of months ago we were saying, should be paid more, are wonderful. They are saints, etc. And now flash forward, and it's like they're selfish and they don't want to do these different things because, again, they're in a system that doesn't honor them as people. And so we have to recognize that, like, the system has to shift. We actually have to value our educators if we want to be able to keep talent in the classroom educating the future. And so, again, being able to have a pandemic pod and be able to opt out, again, diminishes some of the resources in the classroom. I think the other thing, too, is, a lot of parents are looking at different types of curriculum. And I think this is an awesome experience for us to be looking at, like, what are my kids learning? Like, what should they be learning this? How do I want to supplement it? And so, again, I'm very pro-parent. I'm all about you being empowered and being able to pour into your children in the way that you see fit. I also think, we should be having this broader question about what's going on with the curriculum that is required through the state. And there are so many people who have talked about how this curriculum isn't inclusive of all of the people who are in the education system, how there are a lot of mistruths, a lot of half-truths, a lot of systemic racism that is embedded in our education system. And so I think if we could put our hands around this and really rally together, we could possibly be moving for an education curriculum that is better suited to reach the whole child, as opposed to just having to figure out how to do that on your own. And I think, curriculum is a huge issue. It's a very political issue. But a lot of times parents, we're not involved in that conversation. We're not fighting that fight. And ultimately, these are our children, right? So we have a stake in what they know and believe and understand about the world. And so rather than just supplement on the side, we need to mobilize and figure out how we can shift the system to actually teach an inclusive, multicultural curriculum. I would say, I think the other thing, and I had like a whole bunch of notes here around why I feel like this pandemic pods are problematic and like what we can do instead, or in addition. Maybe I really want to say in addition, because some of these changes are things that are going to take time to implement, and I understand the urgency of now. Like, obviously, I need my kid to be educated now. I need him or her to have access to these different things. I have to work. Like, there is the urgency of now. And so while you are creating your pandemic pod, I would really just encourage those of you who have the means and the network and the resources to do that, to think about how you can leverage some of that for communities that don't have that, right? Can you adopt a classroom to help make sure that that teacher has the resources that he or she needs to be able to deliver quality education virtually or in person? Because again, I don't know, for those who have to be in person, where they're getting the resources for PPE and all these other things in light of budget cuts, and those things cost money, right? If you have the different networks and you have access to resources, can you leverage some of that for communities that don't have access, right? Like, if you are working in some of these corporations that have philanthropic goals, etc., can you talk with anyone about providing, for example, things like high speed, Wi-Fi access in communities that don't have access, right? Can you pay for a subscription for that for a classroom or a community? How can we come together identifying that clearly the education system doesn't work and people have been opting out of it in various different ways, whether that's going to private school or charter schools, homeschooling. People have been opting out because what is the status quo has not been acceptable to those who have the ability to opt out. But what can we do to make sure that the public education system that most of us are paying into anyway because of property taxes, etc., actually is delivering on its promise of educating every child? And so those are some of the things that I was just thinking about when we're looking at this, like, pandemic pods. And again, I think there's innovativeness there that's, exciting. And how can we use that energy to address some of the challenges in our education system? But if we solely just think about what we need for our kids and pull out of this public education system, we're not going to be any better as a country. And I think that sometimes our individualistic desires to be independent people with rights sometimes clouds our ability to see that we can do more together. We can actually have an amazing educational experience here in the United States if we would collectively come together and figure out what that should look like. We could have school choice. We could have options if we started to think, how do we make that happen, as opposed to how do we prevent certain people or certain communities from having access to resources? If we were to think about policy in a way that bettered everyone, we could figure out how to fund different initiatives and how to make things available in all communities so that people don't have to feel like there's some sort of scarcity around education. Knowledge is infinite. It is accessible. There is enough for everyone, and until we get to the place of understanding that that is absolutely the truth, and we can actually do things differently, we can reimagine education in a real way, not just sort of tinker with all the different pieces right now, but we could actually level the playing field, start all afresh, and create the innovation that we're trying to create outside of the public education system, then I feel like we could really move forward. So I don't really have a specific thing to do. If this at all evoked any thoughts, if you were at all inspired or curious or have questions, I highly, highly encourage you to share this video, to talk with your friends, your family, your networks about it, to see how can you leverage your privilege to help children. Ultimately, it's children, right? These are kids. They don't choose whose home they're born into. They don't make decisions about where the school is, etc. They don't even get to vote, right? So they don't have a say in what we provide to them. So if you have a heart for children, I would just encourage you to connect with people within your networks and figure out ways that you can adopt a classroom, provide support for children who are in need, who don't have access to the resources that we would hope that every child has. And rather than be like, well, their parents should have this, that, or the other, recognize that they're children. Like, they don't get to make the decisions for their parents. They shouldn't be punished for the things their parents can or cannot do in a country that has the amount of wealth and abundance, etc., that we have here. We can figure out how to provide support across all backgrounds, incomes, etc., to make sure that kids are getting what they need. This virtual learning situation is creating an equity issue, and ultimately we pay the price for that down the road when we don't have the type of citizenry that can make the decisions that will keep um, America a thriving beacon of hope for the rest of the world. So those are my Thursday thoughts about this pandemic pods, and just, how can we use that innovation at a higher level to support everyone. And I think my call to action would be for you to go on Donors Choose and find a classroom to support and help teachers get the supplies that they need. My call to action would be to figure out, maybe do some micro funding, pull together some of your friends to figure out what resources can be made available. I know that there are all sorts of things on the news about being able to support certain districts and provide resources there. So my call to action would just be for you to figure out how you can get involved in ensuring that every child in Georgia and even across the country that is going to be in a virtual learning experience or remote learning has access to the best remote learning experience that they can have. So again, if you enjoyed this, please share, tell a friend, follow me. You can follow me one of two ways, at that Ed Law Lady or at the F Young Firm. Both of them are on the video, so you can see them there. I love Instagram. I'm trying to love Facebook more. I'm also trying to tweet more, so you can definitely follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Share your thoughts. If you agree, disagree, share that. I'm all about having a real dialogue and using that dialogue to move us towards decisions that better the society at large. So that's all I've got for you. Have a great Thursday. Have a great weekend. Please, there's so much going on. Make sure that you are managing your health wellness, taking some time out for yourself, breathing, exercising, sleeping, turning off social media and the news so that you can be the best self that you can be for yourself and your children and your community. All right, take care.